seeing, And for you, I guess for you, would that like watching playoff hockey, whether it's NHL, OHL, whatever, are like what would you qualify like or what characteristics are you putting on for a team to be a winning team or a team to go deep into the playoffs or be successful? Like, what are some of your key characteristics? Because it isn't just that. Like, it's not just the grind kind of stuff.
Not at all. You
So
need
it's like
skill.
if you're spelling out your ideal team of like how to win, it's like what do you need, what do you want to see, and all that kind of thing.
Well, you got like the thing is like you could talk about like because I don't want to ever sound negative about having skill. I mean, that would sound absolutely ridiculous, right? Like you don't need skill guys, you just need grinders. That's not what we're saying at all. What we're saying is you need to have your top guys be top guys, but then you need like but what happens in the playoffs, it just gets harder. Why? So a lot of people might say, why does it get harder? My wife asked that. Why is it so different in the playoffs? Well, the difference in the playoffs is that there's more at stake now. If you lose, you're done. So that's number one. So your emotions go up. There's more at stake, and you play that same team, at the NHL, OHL level. Not so much college because they play one and dones, right? But when you play someone that a possible 7 times in a row in a week and a half or 2 weeks, then what happens is you get a hate on for people. You do. You actually, little things get under your skin. So it could be, maybe you're not the most physical guy, let's say. All right. But I'm trying to think of an NHL guy that would be a good example. I can't think of someone right off the top of my head, but let's say he's a point guy, but just after the whistle's getting in someone's face a little bit, or just a little jab here and there that throws another team off a little bit. So now you're playing with the emotions too, not just the physical, right? You're just pissing people off, or because it's possibly 7 games of this stuff. Just a little elbow, a little jab after the whistle. Those little things go a long way. But as far as like the playing goes, it's finishing checks. But then finishing checks without being stupid. Like you don't want to go out of your way and get out of position. So you need to be. So I think what happens in the playoffs, you're playing. You'll see teams play not so offensively minded, obviously, because if you give up position, your defensive position, like one bounce the wrong way could change a series. So it's a little bit more cautious that way, but it's the physicality that goes into it that makes just a big difference. Grinding along the walls, it's the little things now. It's like, and if you really watch, if you're watching, pay more attention to face-offs, winning face-offs. Where does the puck go? Does it get deep? Can you control a game, manage the game, stuff like
Yeah,
that?
we were looking at some video the other day. It was I think who was it? It was Gensel that we were watching. And he scored a goal, and it was like subtle. I guess what I want to kind of get at is the subtleties of like little details, and how much more important that is coming down the stretch in the playoffs in particular, because things are so much more buckled down. So I don't know if people remember the goal. Good. I don't remember if the people remember the goal, but basically Gensel got a pass in the slot. He was right in coverage. It was almost by the face-off dot. And just before this pass came, he was fully covered, and he just like took a little step, left-handed shot. He took a little step out, and it was just enough where he was out of the reach of this guy and out of the reach of this guy, so he could get a one-timer shot off, which I think he ended up scoring on the play if I'm remembering correctly. And we stopped and we kept going over this play 3, 4, 5 times with the team or the guys watching the video, because there was good wall work that led up to it. So we're like, this guy good, but then this guy over here, like the little detail of just making sure he's open. Like Mac was talking about it, and the way he said it was, the guys without the puck dictate the play. Because if you get to open ice, you're now an option. If you don't, you're not. So he was talking about this play with Gensel, and he just happened to did a little baby kind of T-push, a foot and a half over. And so as a left-handed shot, it made that stick lane available. If he stayed in the same spot, he's not available. And these are the kinds of things that down the stretch, it's like these little subtle details. It's the difference. You talked about it before with the one-time pass. If you're off the guy's foot by an inch, if you're off the foot by an inch and a half, it's like, yeah, you made a great spin-a-ram over there, but then your pass was bad, and now you guys didn't get a shot off. And those are the things that start to have an impact on the game down the stretch. It's not the fancy the fancy stuff. It's the putting yourself in a good position, making sure your stick is ready to go, making sure you can find a guy on the tape. Like these are the things that actually make the difference down the stretch. And this is what people look for. This is what they look for, like this the stick detail. They look for your positioning in the offensive zone. If you're making yourself available for shot lanes, if you can hit the pass when the guy's open, they pick up on this stuff. You talk about it with scouts all the time, where you'll say, "Yeah, this guy he doesn't have very many points, but he's playing with these guys." It's like we know, like we can see that, And I've been having this conversation with parents like endlessly over the last several weeks, doing all this academy stuff, talking with them about next year, and keep re-emphasizing all of the people that we have working with us are paying attention to these things. Like these are the things we're looking for. We're looking for these little detail things that actually make a difference to making a good player. And this is how we're gauging potential of kids. Do they do some of this stuff? Do they have some of these tools? Are the shortcomings they have fixable? Which for the younger the kid, the more fixable, because there's just so much more time, you know. But it's important that people see that parents realize that, and it's a hard thing for people to see again when they're right in it, especially as parents with younger kids. But these are the kinds of things that down the line people are going to start talking to them about and asking them about. You know what I mean?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the young guys like coming up, I would say like we were playing like it's called Two Nuts North this morning. It's a small area game, and so Charlie and I were like the option pass, like for possession. So we get the puck, and guys, to your point, without the puck, is you're standing there and you're going, okay, I can't make the play because I'm not allowed to move. And guys just didn't have that in their head, like, okay, I got to get open or got to work hard to get open and stuff like that. And that's the difference, right? It's the little things that you do without the puck that make you a great player. And that's speaking like you just mentioned, the scouting piece is like that's the one thing I would say to people, and we've said this before is, well, I'll say it a different way. Is like the more and more and more and more that I'm in this business of teaching hockey after I've played and coached, is the more I see how important it is for kids to do the things that aren't popular on YouTube, right? Because like I've always said, people could run all kinds of skill drills and stuff like that, but when it comes down to big boy hockey, as you start playing big boy hockey, it's those skills are not executionable, or they're very rarely executionable. There's rare moments where something like that could happen. Like I mean, last night I think, or the night before, the first night of the playoffs, Connor McDavid came down, did the spinorama, got it across, and it was a great goal. Like that's Connor McDavid, and guys can pull that stuff off, but it's the other stuff that make it that make you the player. And so, like if you look at when you look, I guess the other side is that when you look at like even the draft rankings that come out and all that stuff, and I mean there's boards all over the place you can follow, right? And the people that they put up there typically are the high end skill guys, and that's okay. And I think when you look at like the NHL Central Scouting, for example, I've had to ask questions about this in the last couple of years because it really didn't make a lot of sense to me how they sometimes rank them. And I was like, okay, what is this? What was the purpose of the Central Scouting? So back in the 70s, the league, the NHL, set up Central Scouting to basically help teams and put a database together for the NHL. And in that, because now if you look at the time, 1970 something to maybe 2000s, 2005 when computers came out, or not came out, but when they became like a tool that everybody would use, you'd have to hire a ton of scouts to get all over the place, right? So hockey's so big now, right? So that Central Scouting was actually a pretty good resource at the time to comparables. That didn't make it. That didn't make it perfect, but it helped because they could identify, yeah, that kind of matches up who we think are the best players. But even though you have that guy at number 6, he's not the type of player we want. So, but in that range, it might help. And as hockey evolved and got better, and the technology got better, and you got the instats and all these different things that can help you scout players, and teams realize, and the resources are there to go all over the world and look at players. There's a lot more scouts per team actually. So now that central scouting database is not necessarily a usable thing for an NHL team. But basically what it's for, I was talking to someone the other day and they said it's good for goalies because you can look and get some comparables, or maybe you didn't see a guy in another place as much, and you can say, yeah, the scouting report from Central Scouting says this, and maybe you can agree or disagree. And he said a couple other things, but he goes, for the most part, it's not something that a team would actually look at, and that makes total sense because if you're on Central Scouting and you're putting a list together, you might watch me play 5 times, and depending on what time of the year that was, I might have been at my absolute best for 5 games. Maybe it was a period of time, like you watched me 5 games in November. You saw me play 5 great games, or maybe you saw me play 5 with a sore ankle and stuff that you don't know, or a injury or something. You put down the lineup to be a checking role, and that's what they see. So, anyways, they look at skating and the stuff like that, but they'll rank them out. But that could be like if you're the Chicago Blackhawks now, and you're looking at pick number 12 or 6 or whatever, it doesn't have to match up to Central Scouting, because it's like now you're going with needs. So you might be a really high end skill guy, but okay, I've already got Connor Bedard, I've got this guy, this guy, this guy, but what we need is 2 really hard to play against defensemen. So that kid could be ranked. Maybe he is ranked number 3 or 4 or 6, but he might be ranked 22.
Yeah,
but that's what we need. So you're
Yeah.
skipping over a whole bunch of guys, and the point is that the marketing piece, and it makes a lot of good stories. Like you take your top 10 guys, and it's like, yeah, these guys they probably are the top 10 players in the world. But after that, or even before that, it can flip around, right?
Yeah, and I remember we looked at this with the OHL draft and the NHL draft of even which guys end up being solidified players. So it's like even from guys that get drafted in the NHL outside of the first like 7 picks or something, 5, then it's like super, and even then there's exceptions, but it's like then it's super hit and miss. Like guys that work out, guys that don't. Like there's guys that we've worked real close with that have been in those kind of in that area, and they're like nowhere. You know what I mean? They don't even play, or they stop playing after a couple years and they never made it. Then you got the late guys that end up figuring it out, or undrafted, or guys that you've mentioned, even coming out of the OHL that sign a contract the day their last season's done and they're good to go. The Jack Guy's an example of that. So it's really doesn't.
Logan Morrison, that's another one I just.
That was the one I was thinking of. Yeah.
Just looked at that kid, and I got to watch him for 2 years, like live, and follow him quite a bit. And he was like always a top point getter in the OHL. And he went 4 years or 5 years without getting drafted. And before the playoffs ended last year, he signed with Seattle. It's like, how does that happen? Like he wasn't even ranked.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? It's
right.
like it's craziness.
So it's a good point. Like because we've done this exercise. You look at where guys end up over time after 10 years later. How many guys played games? How many guys ended up there? And 10 years before they're on top of the world because they were a second round pick or whatever. Only 10 years later they're not playing, or they're not where they thought they'd be, or whatever, which is okay. It's not that it's not okay. It's just it's not what they thought, and so I'm going to be interested now with our crop of guys that are coming up on this kind of age. It'll be interesting to see over the next 3, 4, 5, 6, however many years, like where do they actually end up shaking out? Because a lot of the guys that we have, they're going to end up chasing it to see how far they can go, and it'll be cool to see relative to draft status who ends up somewhere versus not, which would be kind of interesting. So